Good morning. Most of you know me. I'm Dan Bottorff, and I've been a part of this church for nearly 40 years. And now, not being clergy active in ministry, I am a gardener active in growing plants and removing weeds. I want to say something important to me this morning, but I also want to start with something equally important to me, but a sidelight. One of the things I've learned about a garden is that it's best placed by a nursery school playground. Our vegetable garden is behind the church over on this side, and it's just outside these windows. And it's a vegetable garden growing modest amounts of edible food. And next to the playground of the nursery school is a chain link fence where we grow beans, because it's 8 feet tall and it's perfect for pole beans. And while I'm in the garden doing my tasks, little children have their noses placed against the chain link fence, calling me. The older ones call me Dan the Farmer Man, and the 2-year-olds say, Man. This week, William was there. He's become quite a friend of mine. William is learning to talk one word at a time. He's good with choo-choo and train and engine and track. You know where this is going. Plane, truck. He's good with mechanical stuff. He hasn't learned Barbies yet. We have a conversation, he and I, one words at a time. Seed, dig from my side, and he with his words. I love little William. My heart swells as an old man be around a little boy like William. Gardens and children and old men should go together. Okay, this is what I really want to talk about. I'm one of those guys who's been in the church a long time and had of the faith since I was a baby, but I don't really ever have a conversational relationship with God. I never have heard God tell me anything verbally. I do get hints and finger points and things like that, indications that, this is the way I should go, or this is what's up here. It's happened in the last year. In October of last year, we were at a wedding in Minneapolis, and after the wedding on Sunday, we went for a ride, and it happened to come to this town along the St. Croix River, out about a half an hour from Minneapolis, and there was a festival in this little town. And one of the things in the festival was a pumpkin regatta. Now, what is that? There were 4 pumpkins, giant pumpkins, probably 300, 400 pounds, that were carved out so a person could sit in them, and they were lowered into the water of the river, and they had a race. They used what's the other boat? Kayak paddles, and they went down the river. There were thousands of people cheering. It was quite a thing. Wow, I'd never seen that before. Then, a month later, we were visiting our daughter in Nova Scotia, We were out for a drive. There was a traffic jam of gigantic proportions for Nova Scotia, a delay of an hour and a half. When they have an accident on an interstate kind of road, size road, they close the highway. So we took an alternate route, which took us past Howard Dill's farm. Howard Dill grows giant pumpkins. Coincidence. We got 2 seeds of the Atlantic giant pumpkin. Now, God didn't tell me, Dan, grow a giant pumpkin. But, these 2 coincidences happened, and I've been looking for something interesting to put out there at the steps that are different than have been there the previous 2 years, 3, 5, it's been 8 years now. How about giant pumpkins? So I started studying giant pumpkin growing. There's quite a bit to it. You need about a half an acre of land. That's not how big our garden is. You need lots of water. You need good fertile soil. You have a little patch of good fertile soil. Why not go for it? Well, I have grandiosity as a part of my character structure, but I try and moderate it. And so I went to the Board of Trustees and to the Administrative Council, and I talked with this, saying the positive and the negatives, and get their advice, and they were enthusiastic to give it a try. It would be an experiment. We currently are in the middle of that experiment. We've experienced a good bit of the downside. The first pumpkins, there were 4 that I'd selected to be the ones for the whole summer. They were eaten one night by the deer. Gone. There were others coming, so I put crates over them so that the deer couldn't eat them. But they rotted, just shriveled up. The biggest one, the nicest one, had happened on a vine that had crawled up in the big bush that's at the top of the rise where the garden is, by the steps. And the pumpkin, about the size of a soccer ball, was in the middle of the bush. Took 5 of us guys to separate the branches, hold the vine, hold and pass the pumpkin to get it back to the ground, successfully. Then the sun came out. Because a pumpkin is so full of water, so much moisture inside, that it swells in the heat of the sun and cracks. And then it rotted from the base. So now there are several pumpkins there in the garden, housed in a cage to keep the deer out. Covered with ground cloth to keep the sun off, and fingers crossed to keep the mold from rotting them from underneath. We'll see what happens. My grandiose ideas of paddling my way across Mindawaskan Pond are somewhat challenged. This is lessons learned from the garden. At the same time, all of this is going on with my obsession to grow a giant pumpkin. From fertilizing and watering, tending and manipulating. At the base of the steps, just outside the office door, down, you'll notice there's a big plant growing. It looked kind of like a zucchini leaf, but it's actually a pumpkin. It's growing in a spot that is the worst soil on our property. Hard clay. It's growing without any extra water, no fertilizer. While my leaves and my pumpkins are turning yellow, these are bright green. I noticed there's a pumpkin forming, about the size of a soccer ball. And then Jeff Broadwell said there's a second pumpkin there, about the same size. When you have a plant that is desirable, but you didn't plant it, show up in your garden, it's called a volunteer. That volunteer is outperforming my best pumpkins. They are green, but they're turning orange, as they should this time of year. Another turn in my story. See the board that used to have numbers for hymns over there? It has a phrase from the prophet Micah. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with God. Now, I sit in roughly the same spot every week here in church. I just met a new acquaintance today. Her name is Haven. And when I sit in that area where she's sitting, the light from somewhere outside comes in and shines off of those letters. And in the course of this summer, the light has moved as the course of the sun changes from 10 to 11 o'clock on Sunday. From the top, do justice, love kindness. And in the last 3 weeks, it's been on the lines, walk humbly with God. I've thought this volunteer pumpkin and my pumpkin patch, God's messing with me. And then I thought, no, God's messing. It's messages for me. And the message is, walk humbly, Dan. That's the lesson I've gotten from the garden.